Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining in. We're just going to give another 2 to 3 minutes for everyone to join in to the session. In the meantime, we would love to know your name and where you're joining in from as we get started for cracking the corporate code. Welcome, everyone. Hi, Terry. Welcome to the call. You can join in from Texas. I know it's early there, but excited to have you on the call. All right, this audience seems a little bit scared to talk about themselves, but we'll just give it another minute for people to join in, and then we can get started. Hi, Pael. Great to have you on the call as well. I'm glad to I'm glad to hear that you're happy to see Janar again. I hope she will add a lot of value to this conversation, and I'm sure she will. All right, I see a lot of people messaging in or typing rather. So I'll let those messages come in, and then we can get started. All right, wonderful. Glad to have you as well, Kimberly. Great. You've already sent everyone the LinkedIn connection request, so everyone can join in for your network as well. Glad to have you on the call. All right, let's get started. So, welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining in as we explore cracking the corporate code, bypassing gatekeepers to land Fortune 5000 pilots. Now, a bit of house rule that I would like to say over here is we will try to do a Q&A session at the end, but we have plenty of questions and scenarios lined up for these amazing panelists. So we're going to try to tackle as much as we can, and then we'll tackle your questions as well. So if you have any questions that come up during the whole conversation, put it into the chat box and we'll get to it as soon as we can, right? But without further ado, let's get started. The central frustration for climate tech solutions isn't just getting a foot in the door. It's the realization that corporate curiosity rarely equals a commercial contract. I've seen it, these people have seen it, and too many startups survive the initial pitch only to drown in multi-year procurement cycles, opaque decision hierarchies, and pilot programs that lead nowhere. Today, we're focused on the strategic mechanics of navigating that enterprise complexity. I'm joined, obviously, by three amazing experts who offer a powerful cross section of insights to help you bridge this gap. Aneri joins us with a deep focus on marketplace strategy and buyer connectivity. She understands the practical positioning required to align a climate solution with the commercial gravity of an enterprise partner. Caitlyn specializes in the circular transition and waste systems. Her on the ground experience is of vital when understanding how to design impact heavy initiatives that remain scalable and commercially relevant for global organizations. And last but not least, Janar brings the lens of corporate R&D and investor readiness, deep tech advising. She will tell you all three of these will tell you more about themselves, but she'll help us look at the customer adoption barriers and how corporate pilots impact your fundraising narrative and long-term credibility with future funders. Together, we'll unpack what these corporate giants actually need, how to bypass the gatekeepers, and how to structure a pilot that acts as a bridge to a permanent commercial relationship rather than a dead end. So I'll hand it over to these amazing co-hosts. Aneri, let's start with you, followed by Caitlin, and then Janar.
Hi everyone. My name is Aneri Pradhan. I'm based in Berlin and I have a firm called Climatic Group, which focuses on further scaling climate technologies and solutions with industry and government. I also run a podcast called Climatic Scale with a K, which the entire focus of the podcast is the same as this talk we're giving right now, which is about examples of how startups have successfully scaled with their corporate partners, or how corporates have also successfully scaled startup solutions that they're working with. So great to be here.
Thanks, Aneri. I'll go next. Hi, everyone. I'm Caitlyn Sockwell. I am the founder of The Waste Not Spot and also a co-host of the podcast called Millennials Gone Circular. More to do with millennials and circular, but we do touch on this topic here and there. So I'm a global circular economy consultant, and I'm based here in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. And I'm on a mission to help organizations transition to the circular economy. So I spend heaps and heaps of time working with startups, corporates, governments, universities, you name it. Circular economy knows no borders. And I often describe myself as a bit of a transition broker, if you will. So helping connect the right people, build the right partnerships, and then also creating the right conditions for circular solutions to scale. So very happy to be here. Lots of exciting knowledge to share and to learn from Aneri and Janar. And also apologies, I do have a cat that likes to get involved, so you might see her running around soon.
Thank you, Sarbik, for being part of this amazing panel. I'm very pleased to share like all the experiences and advisory that I can offer. So I had a bit of an unusual career in a corporate because over 30 years I've covered the whole value chain from R&D to scale up to manufacturing, supply chain, procurement, sustainability, and product commercialization. So yes, I think it was quite rich, a very intense experience. And after 30 years, I joined startup accelerators as an advisory, also to discover that corporate experience can be quite helpful to startups, even though it's two different worlds, but there is a lot of business commonalities and business principles which applies in both. And after 3 years being an advisor to startups, it was a logical step for me to join Angel Investor Club in Switzerland, and where I support angels with the due diligence. So.
Perfect. Amazing. No better people to have on this call to give you advice on what to do next than these three amazing people. So, without further ado, let's get started with the first question. Now, Janar, you were already speaking, so I'm going to ask you this. From a deep tech perspective, how do you distinguish a pilot that builds investor confidence, something that you were just talking about, that you also do a lot of due diligence for, from one that signals a lack of strategic focus?
Okay. So first of all, I think I have to reassure you that investors don't generally expect every pilot to convert immediately. So I think there is an understanding of how the big customers' decisions being made, and usually this is a very slow process. But it's very, very important as a founder to have a portfolio of pilots, meaning that you don't rely on one. Plus, in addition, you always discover a different urgency behind the solution. For example, big customers may be slow, smaller customers or mid-sized customers can be fast because it's more important and more urgent for them. So it's very important to try different industries and different company sizes. And then that kind of experience will help you also to understand the dynamics of the decision making, but as well as the urgency which each customer profile puts behind the initiative or the project. Secondly, when you communicate to the investor or the potential investor about your progress with the pilot, there is no need to, let's say, to be overly optimistic or to be overly pessimistic that, yes, we successfully have done everything, but the decision, I think there is no point really to be one way or another. The most important outcome of the pilot is that you have de-risked something, you learned something. So that's why the most constructive updates that you can give to the funders, to the funders, investors, is what have you learned from this pilot? What you have to risk? Is it technical performance? Is it operational feasibility? Is it user acceptance? Could it be a new barrier that you discovered? CapEx barrier, budget ownership, alignment or misalignment, cross-functional, because usually the R&D, engineering, procurement, sustainability have different priorities, sometimes conflicting interests, and the decisions are not always easy. So without being, let's say, too long, the bottom line, be transparent. The de-risking has much more value than the commercial commitment. That's what investors after.
Amazing. Yeah, I think a lot of people would breathe a sigh of relief saying that, oh, not every pilot is going to be important in that sense. Like, the investor is not looking for every pilot to be successful, right? But they're looking for whether or not you're learning from that pilot. And I think this is such an important point that you brought across, Janar. Caitlyn, do you have anything that you would like to add to that, by the way?
Oh, I'm sort of reflecting more on a circular economy project perspective. And yeah, I guess differentiating the pilot that goes on to be commercial from the isolated experiment where you're learning stuff, which is super valuable. For me, I think the biggest difference that I see is that successful pilots are sort of designed backwards from adoption. So you need to be able to cast your mind into the future and know what successful adoption looks like, and then start laying those bricks from that point to where you're starting now, rather than the other way around, if that makes sense. I would say a key factor, like I said, a clear pathway to scale, which is where you're asking yourself, what would I need to make happen for my pilot to be rolled out across the organization, for example? So I think a key difference between that isolated experiment pilot and the pilot that ends up in a commercial, scaling, you understand exactly who owns that budget, who's in charge of implementing, who needs to approve a rollout, and of course, what success looks like for you. So that's like number one key. I think another thing, and in the words of the amazing Jacqueline Kramer, one of my circular economy heroes, she's the former Minister for the Environment here in the Netherlands, you need to find your coalition of the willing. So the pilots that generate commercial gravity are the ones that are actually finding their champions and keeping them close and involved right from the get-go. This could be anyone, sustainability teams, operation teams, procurement, et cetera, et cetera. The more people that are invested in seeing your pilot succeed, the harder it's going to be for potential investors down the line to ignore you, really. And I think last but not least, your pilot is producing a story. You're telling a story with what you're doing. You're building a whole narrative. Yes, you're building proof and case studies, yes. But I think the even more valuable are the testimonials, the stakeholder buy-in you're generating, the social license you're getting to operate, and the impact evidence that you're gathering. And this all adds a bit more evidence as to why your pilot needs to scale, because you've already got people saying they need it, they want it, they've seen it work. Again, hard for investors to ignore.
Yeah, amazing. I think as soon as you said point number one, the first quote that came to my mind was the one from Steve Jobs that goes, "Life is very hard to look forward, but it only makes sense looking backwards." And if you build a pilot looking as though you've already achieved what you want to achieve and then building it backwards from there, that would be, I mean, that would really crack the code, right, for a lot of people. Amazing. So now, looking and reflecting on a circular economy set of projects that you've kind of experienced, what differentiates a pilot that generates commercial gravity, right, from a mere isolated experiment? And you've already touched on this, but do you have anything else that you would like to add to this question?
Not necessarily. I think I just jumped the gun and answered you already. But I would say know what success looks like, work backwards from there, find your champions and involve them straight away, and tell your story and make it hard for investors to ignore you. Rally the troops.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Aneri, would you have anything else to add to this, by the way?
Yeah, well, actually, on my podcast that I mentioned already, Climatic Scale, every single industry speaker that I've had has said almost the exact same thing, which is that many times startups just present their solution and don't hear what their problems are and how that solution solves that problem. And that's one of the biggest reasons why they don't move forward with startups. And so part of the storytelling that Caitlyn's talking about, I think, goes into that. It's understanding not just, it's not just conveying what the solution is, it's really understanding what part of that solution or what aspect can truly solve the problem. And so that includes setting the KPIs from the start that match to the customer's problems. It cannot be matching to the solution's KPIs. And when that POC, the visual engagement, is designed correctly, then that creates the data that the customer needs to see to move forward. And just to add what Caitlyn said about the different kind of decision makers and stakeholders, there really is what we call a decision making unit that you have to work with to really move forward. So it's not just the champion who might be bringing you in to the company, but it's who's a budget owner, who's evaluating the technologies, who are the users, who are the experts that are going to get involved, especially with more technical clients that have a lot of already engineers and technical people in place. Who are the logistical units that would be involved, who can very commonly be blockers. Also, who provides veto power as well. There's a very interesting conversation I had that with a Fortune 5, I will say, someone in one of the business units who was basically extremely frustrated because he found a battery solution that was much cheaper than the corporate solutions that this corporate was comfortable going with. And he really wanted to work with them. And finance just keeps blocking it because they're like, we have our preferred vendors list. So he's like, well, this solution would save the company 50%, yet he is really struggling to move it forward. So sometimes your champions inside face that internal resistance. So it may not even be your solution. There could be other blockers involved. So it's about thinking creatively about how to get to all those people. Because if your champion can't talk to finance, maybe there's a way you can talk to finance.
Wow, that's so valuable. I think it's very important to understand who all the stakeholders are in this decision that is going to be made, right, to move from pilot to commercial. And if you can do it yourself, go ahead, right? But remember that you're telling a story, and building that story, building that trust about your product is going to also help you convince. I say convince in the most broadest of spectrums, but to kind of help you showcase why there is value, right? And so, Aneri, moving from this, right, when founders report high engagement but zero momentum, what structural misalignment is typically stalling the deal? And I think you mentioned a little bit that, there's other decision makers in the whole pipeline, that might be doing it. But what would you give advice, like what advice would you give to kind of go beyond it, apart from just maybe finding the person in finance and finding them on LinkedIn and being like, hey, by the way, what would you suggest, right, in this sense?
Yeah, I think it's using that champion to try to secure as many meetings as you can internally. Like, yeah, you're not going to find that person in finance on LinkedIn, but if you can really find somebody who's willing to problem solve with you, because here's the challenge. I mean, startups are busy. You're not. May not be the only customer you're working with, right? There was a whole big lead list in your CRM that you're working with. So if you're facing these kind of blockers, it's very easy to be like, okay, let me move on to the next one. But if you see real potential there and you have a really, really passionate champion, I think it is worth leveraging that champion to try to access more stakeholders internally to move it forward.
Amazing, amazing. And Gerard, do you have anything else that you can add to this, moving forward?
Yes, I think I totally understand an example when the finance is blocking it. And actually, it's very often finance and procurement. Specifically, it's very important whether this company who is making your choices, whether they have an equivalence of the technologies, an equivalence of the ingredient and materials that they are buying. Obviously, big companies specifically, they don't put all eggs in one basket. They always need supply security, and they need to rely on the equivalences of those technology. Because obviously with the startups, there is a lot of insecurity, like in terms of supply security, financial insecurity. There are many things. So I sort of, in this aspect, I understand those corporate decisions. So that's why it's very, very important to do a homework when you pitch and when you pilot something, like whether the company has an equivalences. And usually they do. Like usually they never look into one side. There is always a portfolio of technologies and solutions that they're evaluating. But indeed, regardless whether your pilot's successful or not, the decision will be very much driven by cost, price, and supply security. Yeah. So that's just another dimension to this discussion. I don't have a solution for that, but I think knowing about the equivalent technologies would help to ease this discussion. And especially if you have an ingredient or material and you know that equivalences exist, that would help. That would help discussion to overcome the supply security concern.
What is that? You need to know your competitors better than they know themselves. Um, kind of statement that I'm hearing over here, and understanding.
And this is how the world works. You cannot rely on one company, especially if you're big. So that's why I think it's easier. Back to our original discussion. That's why sometimes it's easier really to have a more successful pilot with a smaller company. They don't have such a big international footprint, and they don't have such a heavy dependency on having multiple sources. So I think a smaller company or even medium-sized company could be a good entry point to learn and to de-risk.
Amazing. Amazing. Great. Great. So I want to shift gears a bit over here and ask Caitlin, um, what is, in your opinion, the optimal framework for validating business value and operational feasibility simultaneously during the pilot phase?
I love this question. Well, I can tell you right now that most founders, and I'm including myself here, so this is from lived experience and lessons learned. Most founders validate whether their solution works, which is fair enough, very important. But we often forget to validate whether it fits in the system. So going back to the question, a pilot should definitely be testing both of those things at the same time. On one hand, we need to test the business value. Does anyone actually care what I'm trying to do? Does it solve a real problem, et cetera, et cetera? And then on the other hand, we need to test for the operational feasibility. Can this realistically function in the real world? The mistake I see founders make is validating their solutions in isolation rather than validating it within the system it needs to operate in. So before we start designing pilots, we need to spend a lot of time understanding the ecosystem, the stakeholders, the incentives, the funding, the operational realities, and how the solution fits into that existing system. So if you don't understand the system, your best innovative solution is going to struggle if it doesn't fit the environment that it's trying to enter. So with the Waste Not Spot, for example, in designing our circular economy projects, we spend a lot of time understanding the system before we ever start designing or even launch a project. So we look at the stakeholders, the existing processes, funding pathways, the different constraints, who needs to be involved in order to make something successful. Then the pilot becomes a technical test, yes, but then also a test of whether the solution can create that business value while operating in the real world. So if you can demonstrate both, not only will that solution work, but then the people can take it, they can implement it, adopt it, scale it. Then congratulations, you've created something that's more likely to move beyond the pilot stage. So to summarize, I think don't just validate the solution in isolation. It's got to work, yes, but it needs to fit in that system as well, both at the same time.
Amazing. Yeah. And the follow up to Aneri is perfect because understanding the ecosystem is what she's all about, right? As well. So um, I think it's so important to understand the ecosystem before you're trying to push agendas. Let's say it like this. Um, and take it forward from there. But Aneri, do you have any kind of comments or follow-ups to what Caitlin said?
No, I think she said it very well. It's understanding the ecosystem, and also just the stakeholders are really important. And it can be challenging actually for a start from the outside to map that without having that information from an insider, which is why I think, I mean, even though champions are not your decision maker, that's why they're so useful in the sales process because they will give you that information so that you can storytell accurately.
Perfect. I think the question that I had for you has already been kind of answered, where the question was, who holds the actual commercial authority in these enterprises, and how do founders inadvertently target the wrong entry points? But I want to kind of shift this question a bit for you and try to go for, instead of looking at it as an entry point, how do I tell people, like, something along the lines what Luke was saying, where um, how do I convince this person that this is not too good to be true, right? and this project that I'm working on, it's not too good to be true for you. So how do I move past that and explain that to the decision makers, essentially?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, especially in Europe, the customers are very data driven. So they don't really typically believe that it will solve the problem unless they see the evidence, which is why I very much champion having case studies, white papers, proof cases that demonstrate how the technology has can prove itself. And without those materials, it can be really difficult to sell, and especially to the B2B audience. But I mean, I don't think that first question was fully answered though, because I, I don't think there's truly a wrong entry point for founders. I think it's just about how to get to where you want to go. So it's like entering a house, right? You entered the house, cool, but maybe you want to get to a specific room, and in order to do that, you have to navigate through different departments. So it's like for startups, the most easiest entry points are by far the innovation units, the corporate venture capital teams, and then but the best one is obviously the business unit or the C-suite, who are typically the hardest ones to reach. So sometimes you need the CVC or the innovation unit to unlock the business units or the C-suites. So it's about navigating through those relationships and conversations to get to the decision makers.
Amazing. Yeah, I see your point. Yeah, maybe it wasn't fully answered. So I guess you can find the way that you to get to the right decision makers by having the conversations with everyone, right? By going through the process and knowing that this is what you want to achieve. So I just have to keep having these conversations and not lose faith, essentially, in the whole process of it all,
Yeah, it's a
right?
communications challenge in the end of the day. And this is actually where I think, especially climate tech, energy tech type founders struggle because they come from a more technical background and sales might be new to them, but it's all about the human relationships, how to communicate effectively, create kind of incentives in the process so that a champion will find the time to help you. There's a lot of this involved, and it's an art.
Yeah, it is an art indeed. Communications, having the right person to communicate with the different departments is an art. Uh, Janar, do you have anything else to add to this?
About how to build the conviction with the customer that your solution is the best. Okay. I think the most convincing argument is always case study. So that you have done with someone else. So the third party validation is the best evidence that can get a lot of attention and traction immediately. However, questions like how do I get this right? If I start from zero, my suggestion to the founders will be never start with big companies. Don't pitch to big companies. Find a small one who will be really willing to go into this case study with you, and that will create this as case study will show and demonstrate that there is a lot of learnings and de-risking has been done. Those performance parameters that you're looking for has been proven based on this case study, and this is the unit economics that we managed to achieve at this scale. And if we go for the bigger scale, the unit of economics will look different, more favorable. I would build, personally, that's how I would build my story if I would be a founder. But fortunately, I was always on the recipient side. So when I was leading R&D team, I've been receiving a lot of pitches and a lot of solutions and startups. And I felt that they were not ready to pitch because there was no proof of concept. Well, not it was mostly claims, and I think it's very dangerous because there is no second chance to make first impression.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And something that Aneri was highlighted, that especially in Europe, data matters, right? And my question as a follow-up to you, Janar, would be how should startups transition away from vanity metrics? But first, obviously, if you could give us an idea of what vanity metrics are and what are not vanity metrics, and to be able to present pilots as rigorous proofs of commercial readiness.
Um, let's see. The first example which comes to my mind, like yesterday, I was in a mass challenge competition, and we were deliberating with the judges who pitched the best. It was very difficult to make a decision because everyone was good and everyone. It was already a selected best of the best finalists, and at the end, we actually came to the conclusion that the startup who really managed to put the whole context from customer point of view, the context was about this is what happened. It was about the coffee alternatives. So this is what's happening with the supply chain. The supply chain is impacted by the climate, and that's why the prices are soaring. And it's very difficult to get to the to specific sorts of coffee at this particular price. So once you put this sort of economic context, right, and you understand that the importance of how you can really position your alternative at a lower cost with a more supply security, with equivalent taste or sensory, then immediately the whole context, then the whole solution actually fits in and lands very well. So what I would encourage everyone, instead of maybe trying to focus on the metrics or ambitions, try to present to understand the context. What are the most pressing and urgent and expensive problem your customer is going through? And then your solution, which potentially meets specific pain point, will land very well, especially if it addresses so many things. And if I simplify the whole story, every customer cares about three things: the revenues, their own profit, their revenues, their cost and bottom line net profit, and compliance. So very, very often, if your solution can help with all three, you pretty much can sell the story with minimal metrics and with minimal ambition. So if your product helps to sell more, if your product helps to save cost, and if your product helps to be compliant, this is it. Oversimplification, of course, but it's more like a self-check assessment list.
Yeah, amazing. I think something that I heard kind of repeated from Caitlyn as well was, do you understand the ecosystem, right? That you're kind of impacting, right? If you understand where you are in the ecosystem and whether you're actually working with the ecosystem and not against it, you're going to be able to sell the pilot into a fully funded commercial project, right? And so, Caitlyn, I would ask you if you have any follow-up points to this, but I also have a question for you if Janar was amazing.
So I'll just add one quick thing, and I think that was a beautiful example, Janar. One thing that immediately came to my mind, Sarbek, when you asked that question, was that founders should focus on the metrics that matter to the people who they're pitching to, or who ultimately are going to make the decisions. So yes, you can talk about these vanity metrics. So how many downloads, how many impressions, how many likes, comments, whatever. But the most persuasive metrics that they care about are the ones that link directly to their organizational priorities and their KPIs that they're trying to achieve, etc. So that's the only thing I wanted to throw in there.
Amazing. And all right, just to take a step further, right? And I want to include Josh's question over here, is that Have you ever seen that yearly corporate budget cycles affecting the chances to landing a pilot? Or when is the best time for someone to kind of pitch?
Best time was yesterday, I think. I think it from I just want to step back in, but just very briefly, the budgets do change, and even I think just getting in and pitching, whether it's this year, next quarter, next year, you just need to build that relationship. It's about relationship building and trust building at the end of the day. Companies have money. If they believe in your solution and they need that solution, they will make it work, whether it's from the R&D innovation budget or it's their marketing budget. They will find the the funds.
Yeah, and this obviously ties back to what Aneri said. Communication is an art, right? You have to keep communicating. And I've seen it too often that people take away from the marketing budget for any other new solutions. But that's how it is. Like people will find the money if they believe that this product or this solution that you're selling is valuable to them and it works for them and within the ecosystem as well. So um, to follow up to this, an area, I just wanted to kind of ask you, how can founders bridge that gap between what a corporate partner views as success and what an investor requires for the next round?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question because I think the way you talk to an investor is very different than the way you talk to a customer. And I think that's actually part of the problem why so many corporate customers feel that startups are not addressing their pain points is because they're presenting to them like an investor. This is our vision. This is what we're set to achieve. And these are our, big goals. And they don't really care about any of that. They just want to know how that solution, specifically the product, is going to solve their problem. And so the way you talk to you have to present very differently. And so yeah, because investors are essentially buying a vision, whereas corporate partners are buying a solution to their pain point. And I think just to not to go back to the question of vanity metrics, but I do want to make a point that I see very commonly with kind of climate tech founders is that a lot of them come from a really good place. They started their companies because they want to make an impact. They want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Like that's their why, right? And it's a very powerful why is why they move forward. But it's not necessarily the why that the corporate partner cares about, unfortunately. So I've seen instances where the startup leads with like, this is how my solution can impact all of these sustainability goals, for example, for a corporate partner. And the sustainability team isn't the one that's buying it. And usually they rarely are because they don't really have as much money as other business units. So you have to start with the ROI, like what is the cost savings that this company is going to make, or what is the additional revenue streams they will gain as a result of using your product. And to start with that, not like my product will save you this much greenhouse gas emissions or cut down your carbon footprint, which is a lot of time how they talk, but that actually the commercial aspects of it are real. So start with that because that's really what they're listening for.
Amazing, amazing. Janard, do you have anything to add to what Aneri mentioned over here?
No, I think we aligned there.
Perfect, amazing. Yeah, I think this is what a lot of startups forget to do. Change the way they talk when they're talking to different people. I think they're all in their head about the spiel that they've had in their head talking to every investor for the last few months, right? And that's all they can think about on repeat, right? We're gonna achieve this, da, 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 da. And then it just doesn't come across like that for the person who you're selling to, right? The person who you're solving the problem for. Um, and that's beautifully put. So I want to take. I've already been including a few of the questions in the chat, so please keep them coming. But I want to kind of already go into a scenario, right? And I think this would add a lot of value as well. So, um, escaping the pilot loop, right? A founder has completed a 9-month engagement, but the partner remains hesitant to commit to a full scale commercial rollout. I'm going to start with you again, Aneri, and then I'll go on to Caitlyn and Janar. So, Aneri, what are the indicators that a pilot has reached a genuine commercial dead end versus a temporary bureaucratic delay?
Yeah, I love this scenario because it's a very common one. And I think, I mean, again, just not to keep repeating communications, but there's going to be a lot of information being shared over a 9-month engagement, right? So if it truly is a temporary bureaucratic delay, that would be communicated to the startup, and that would be honest. If the partner is hesitant because there's something about the solution they didn't like, well, then that's obviously a bigger problem, but that's also a solvable one if the communication is there. Like and sorry, not to keep referencing my podcast, but it's just such a good story. I had a guest, JD Daha from Siemens Energy, who shared about a example of where he was working with a startup who didn't upfront tell them that they needed to do a lot of data cleaning to work with them. And so because they didn't communicate that, the Siemens Energy was surprised at how much extra time it took to get to the first deliverable or KPI in the project. And so just being upfront about even those little things that need to be done to move it forward really helps in achieving project success. Because if those little things aren't communicated throughout the project, that could lead to a genuine hesitation from the partner, because it's like, well, is the startup really able to roll out with us because they haven't been fully honest about the limitations of the product that they have. So that's why I believe delays are mostly caused by communication. And also, just to again talk about the data, how are the KPIs set? How much of them are unlocking the data that the client cares about, the customer, and they're looking for transformation, not really incremental improvements, because honestly, a lot of big customers can make incremental improvements on their own. They don't need startups for that. So what kind of transformation can be unlocked through the data? And so, yeah, so I think it's up to, of course, the startup to figure out if it's truly a like a bureaucratic delay, or whether it's something that is truly hesitation on the client side, and then figuring out ways to unblock that, which generally comes through just open and clear communication.
Amazing. Yeah. These scenarios are packing a lot of information in the sense that I'm sure all three of you have so much to talk about for each of these scenarios. So I'm going to open the floor and allow you to piggyback off of Aneri or whoever is speaking to add your own points to each question. So if either Caitlyn or Janar, if you have anything else to add to this question about uh, understanding whether or not the pilot has reached a genuine dead end versus a temporary bureaucratic delay, please go ahead and add to it. If you can unmute yourself.
I can add only one sentence. Like, if you don't understand why partner remain hesitant to commit to full scale, have a conversation, understand why, and try to address it. I think we are talking back to this sort of what has been de-risked and what is yet to be de-risked, right? So sometimes if the technical aspects and feasibility aspects have been de-risked, it doesn't mean that the commercial aspects have been de-risked. So try to find out what is this barrier. The barrier could be high capex, or the barrier could be the integration into the infrastructure will become so much costly, and this is not visible to founder. So effectively, there could be many reasons: financial, again, conflict of interest, lack of budget. I think there are millions of reasons why, and each of the reasons will have its own action or its own understanding. Like, is it problem addressed, or this is the dead end? I think there are so many different scenarios, but I think most important, understand the reason why.
Maybe I'll just add, just to round off that question. So the question, if I remember, are around the indicators that the pilot is either reached a delay or a dead end. And I think it's not hard to determine where you're at. So if you're still having meetings, you're still being introduced to people, they're still requesting things from you, that's a clear sign they're still keen to work with you, and it's just bureaucracy. On the other hand, if there's no follow-up, there's no new champions, the discussions are sort of repetitive and just kind of fizzling out, that's sort of you can feel it in your gut, I think.
I wish everyone had the ability to feel it in their gut. What's happening inside that corporate. However, I think something that is very important, and you know, I keep coming back to this because Aneri, you said something brilliant about communication as an art. You have to be able to communicate, and you have to be able to understand what is the holdup. You have to be able to ask this question point blank to people and be able to be ready for that answer. And number one, be ready for that answer. And number two, know if you can de-risk what they're asking. And I think this is where I'm going to connect with Zhanar about what she said. That your ability to de-risk is going to also showcase your capacity as someone to move beyond the pilot, right? Do you have the resources to de-risk? Do you have the capacity to de-risk? Does the de-risking, and this is something as a founder you have to understand, does the point of de-risking this particular concept that the person has a problem with, is it going to change away from the mission too much that you don't want to continue with it? Right? I think this is also something that you have to internally ask yourself as a founder, right? Is it diverting me from my mission or what I believe my mission was? And sometimes you adapt and sometimes you don't, right? But kind of asking Caitlyn this question as a follow-up, and I'm very wary of time. We have about 7 minutes, so we're gonna try to get through these last two questions of this scenario and then see if we can answer any of the additional questions that have come in. So, which design flaws in the initial pilot structure often lead to this loss of momentum?
Well, spoiler alert, we have touched on a couple. So my first instinct, as soon as I heard the corporate was hesitant, I went, it sounds like maybe the pilot wasn't designed with the end decision in mind. So after 9 months, there's a reason why, like Zhanar had said, there's a reason why they're hesitating. And it's usually because the pilot, they generated activity, which is well and good, but they didn't provide enough evidence to prove to that organization why the project needs to be scaled. So, the founder probably never worked backwards from the rollout decision. So the flaw then is that the pilot was designed to prove that the solution worked rather than to prove to the organization that it's ready for adoption into their organization. So I think the first likely design flaw is they've not defined what success looks like together with that partner, not unilaterally, but together. So that's the first thing I would look at if I had a time machine to go back 9 months. You want to be asking questions together with your partner, like what outcomes would justify a rollout throughout the entire organization? Who needs to approve the next stage? What evidence do they need to see from this pilot? What risks are we trying to reduce, etc. So I'm afraid that if those questions weren't answered at the beginning, it's painfully easy to reach 9 months and only to find out everyone had sort of different expectations. Another possible design flaw we could be seeing here is that the wrong stakeholders were involved. So lots of pilots are run with the innovations team, who are all excited about the pilot projects, but the people who are actually, eventually needing to manage the budget, operations, the procurement, implementation, like you talked about, Aneri, the data stuff, the data cleaning, sounds like they weren't really involved from the get-go, and they all need to be involved, not just the innovation team. When you get everyone involved, I think this is kind of a recurring theme. You can actually have momentum, and that pushes the pilot past just a pilot. And I think one last thing I'll mention here is that it's highly likely the founder did not build a solid relationship with that partner alongside the pilot. So I think that's a very fundamental thing that we've glossed over. But work on your people skills, people. It's all about trust and relationships. Pilots in and of themselves are just as much a trust building exercise as they are providing technical proof to the organization. So if the founder only communicated in the beginning and then maybe halfway through and then a final report, then the partner really hasn't gone on that journey with you. They're not really as invested. So I think the strongest pilots create regular touch points so that the stakeholders feel a bit of ownership over the outcome. I go on and on, but relationships and trust building is queen. So as I've related to, the best pilots do not spend 9 months proving the technology. They spend that 9 months building evidence and trust and finding those champions. So yeah, okay, I'll get off my soapbox. I'll leave it there.
Amazing. Janar, do you have anything that you would like to add to what has already been said?
I probably just sum it up like everything what we discussed. I think there are two things, right, which is critical for the founder. First is to get the pilot, to get into it. And I encourage everyone to understand the customer problem, understand customer priorities, and understand whether your solution fits to solve those urgent priorities and urgent problem. Secondly, does it really fit? Does your solution make customer increase revenue, reduce costs, and be more compliant? And thirdly, once you get the pilot and you go ahead with it, make a very clear plan of what are you planning to de-risk, and that's not just on the technical aspect, the commercial aspect, the return on investment aspect, and integration aspect. So understand the barriers. I think probably that's a simplified recipe.
Perfect. We're not going to be able to answer all the questions, so I'm just going to tell everyone this who is still around, and a lot of you from the beginning are still around, that these amazing people are available on Forward, and will be happy to kind of help you throughout your journey through Forward Consulting as well. So just look them up, and we're happy to help you as a startup founder to get more traction through the help of these amazing people. Now, a quick question I think we can be able to tackle from David. How do startups align effectively with the right partners? And I think this is a wonderful question to end on, right? Because sometimes the platforms, especially in climate health, can be promising, this can be a lot of platforms like comes to mind, can be promising, only to end up with slow uptake or interests. So how do we get these people to align with the right partners?
I have 4 words. Align to their values. Yes, 4 words. Align to their values.
Aneri, Janar, anything to add to that?
I think that sums it really well.
Amazing, amazing. So, as a final last sentence from all of you, what is the one thing that you would want everyone on this call to remember from everything that you've said? One sentence. Aneri, since you've got yourself unmuted, go ahead.
Again, I think we said it many times. It's be people. No, we're not this is the advantage of not using AI is actually the human relationship aspect, the authenticity, the relationship building, the trust that all comes from human to human interaction and really good communication.
Amazing. Janar, go.
If you aim to approach a big customer for the pilot, for the very first pilot, try not to. Find a smaller partner, a smaller customer who will go on a pilot with you. So your case study will help you to get a bigger customer after.
And last but not least.
And for me, so trust, communication, the smaller fish first. They've all been said. I think maybe adding to that, find your coalition, the willing, and relationships first. And know who you're talking to. Appeal to, put yourself in their shoes, and appeal to those shoes.
Amazing. Thank you, all three of you. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. It was wonderful conversation, a lot of amazing insights. This session is recorded, so you will be able to see it later on. It will be posted on our YouTube channel as well, so you can get it there as well. But thank you all for joining in. Thank you, wonderful people. Have a wonderful day and take care of yourselves. Bye. Stay safe.